These testimonials are representative of my or our experiences, but the exact results and experience will be unique and individual to each person. The information provided herein is not medical advice and is not intended to substitute for the advice of your personal physician or other healthcare providers. Welcome to The Beautiful Bag. This is your host, LeeAnne Hayden, cancer survivor, and more importantly, ostomy lifer. Each and every week, I'm going to be bringing a special guest or some inspiration for you and a few little stories along the way so that you can learn what life is like for us to be living in an ostomy and why we all think it's a beautiful bag. So listen in and let's get started.
Hey everybody. Okay, this week in partnership with Hollister Incorporated, we created a video for you titled Stay Hydrated with an Ostomy, a life-saving necessity. It is a must-watch for anyone with an ostomy or anyone who knows someone with an ostomy. In this video, I discuss the importance of proper hydration, practical tips to stay hydrated, and the unique considerations for individuals living with an ostomy. The link in this video is going to be in the show notes, so make sure you check that out after you listen in. So now on with the show. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of The Beautiful Bag. And this week I have guest Taylor Mitchell with us. Taylor and I met at the UOAA convention. I've been following her on Instagram. She's pretty amazing on there, I'll tell you. She's got some followers too. And so if we're going to get you her handle so you can follow her there too. But Taylor's got a story to tell. It's not your typical Crohn's colitis cancer journey. Hers is a little bit different. So we're going to get into it, and I'm not going to take your thunder, Taylor, but thank you so much for being with us today.
I am happy to be here. Very happy.
Yeah, we are so happy to have you. So let's jump into it. So we were just talking right before we hit record, and we're like, okay, I'm like, better get this on the story. And your journey is you're undiagnosed. So let's talk about that.
So I was a relatively healthy child growing up. I didn't have a lot of issues at all. And, I rarely had to go to the doctor except for, get your shots and all the basic things as a kid and all that kind of stuff. And so, I turned 20 years old. So like 2011, 2012, I one day woke up, I wasn't feeling good. I just kind of felt like nauseated and my stomach was hurting. And I was just like really exhausted and tired. And so I had gone to church and I was like, okay, like my mindset was always just like, just got to keep going, just push through. Cause like really, I'd never been like sick. So I was just like, oh, like, I don't know, I'm just not feeling good, whatever. And so I got there and I was standing and I just started to feel like, okay, I'm going to pass out or something. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go to the bathroom because I was like, I'm going to pass out or throw up, not sure. And so I literally like took a step back and then immediately blacked out. And like I fell and I hit my head on a table and a wall and a floor. And thank God it was carpet. So it hurt, but it wasn't, I didn't crack my head open. And so I like came to and I literally was like blind. All I could see was white. And so I was just sitting there and I was like, I don't know what's going on. And people are like, are you okay? Like, did you eat this morning? And I was just like, well, I wasn't feeling good, but I didn't think much about it. I've never like had this issue before. And so I like, after like maybe about 10 or 15 minutes, like my vision came back and, I kind of started to feel a little bit better. And so I kind of just like went about the rest of my day. Like I didn't go to the doctor. I didn't do anything else. And I just chalked it up to, I was a fluke thing. Like, I don't know, I wasn't feeling good. Okay. And so like I went on and almost a year later, kind of a similar thing happened. I woke up, I wasn't feeling good. And I'd just been struggling the whole day, had a headache, nausea, stomach was hurting. And so, like, I honestly, in the back of my mind, didn't really have the incident from the year prior in my brain. And so I was just like kind of laying on the couch and stuff. And at the time, I was living with my parents, and my dad was like, maybe some fresh air will help you. Like, I'm going to go to the grocery store. Let's just get you up, walk around and stuff. And so we went to the grocery store, got some groceries, and I was just progressively feeling worse and worse. And so I told my dad, I was like, Dad, I really don't feel good. And he was like, okay, we're going to check out right now. And so we went over to like the customer service line, and my dad was like, we need to like check out right now. And so there was one person in front of us, and there was a lady behind us. And I just remember I looked over at my dad and I just was like, Dad. And then I blacked out, and I just collapsed. And so when I came to, this was stuff my dad told me. So it was really crazy because the person behind me was actually a nurse, and she was able to catch me before my head hit the floor. And so I was just laying there, and it was the same thing of like my vision was just white. I couldn't see anything. I could hear people talking. And so of course at the grocery store they call the paramedics and everything. And so they show up, and like my stomach's hurting. I still can't see, and I can't really respond to anybody. And so the paramedics are asking me, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I can't respond to them, but I can hear them. And so finally they're just like, okay, we're gonna have to take her in. And so they get me up on the gurney, put me in the truck, and like my stomach starts hurting so bad. It was an excruciating pain that was like it made me cry. It was just so bad. And I was just like, it feels like there is a garbage disposal in my stomach, and it's just being like crumbled up. And so I get to the hospital, and then I'm sitting there and I'm just like crying, and I'm like, my stomach hurts, my stomach hurts. And like at this point, my vision had came back. And so they were like, okay, well, let's get her some pain meds. And so they were getting ready to do all of that. And then I threw up black blood. And so once that happened, then everything really kicked into high gear. And so then they were like, oh my gosh, we need to pump her stomach. Like, and so I had my stomach pumped. And I will say that is an experience that I never, ever, ever, ever want to have again. It was awful. And the nurse that I had, she wasn't that nice and wasn't that gentle. And I needed smaller tubes. And so the tubes she was using were too big. So she was just like shoving them up my nose and down my throat. And it was just scratching and hurting. And so like I was just screaming, and my dad, he was out in the hallway, and I was just like, I need my dad, I need my dad. Like, and the lady was like, you're gonna be okay. And I just like would not stop screaming for my dad. And so they finally like let him in. And so he was like trying to comfort me and stuff. And so they pumped my stomach. And then they were like, okay, we're going to admit you because obviously something is wrong here. And so I stayed in the hospital overnight. They did a bunch of tests and everything, couldn't really find anything. And so then they were like, all right, well, we've kind of done what we can do for you here. So you're going to have to go follow up with a gastroenterologist. And I'm like, what is a gastroenterologist? I've never been to that before. I don't know what that is. And so they were like, yeah, okay, here's who we, advised or whatever. And so I made the appointment and did some more tests. And they were like, well, you have like, a few like small ulcers, but not enough to have caused the amount of blood that was in your stomach and the issues that you were having. And so I was like, okay. And from that point, um, things just went downhill very fast. So I started to not be able to really eat solid foods. My stomach was hurting constantly. I was just in pain all the time. My stomach was bloating. I was starting to get headaches. And like my joints were starting to hurt. My body was starting to swell. And so I was going to all of these like general doctors and internal medicine doctors. And then it kind of progressed to, we have no idea what's wrong with you. So you need to start going seeing specialists. And so then I'm going to see heart specialists and neurologists and like all these different specialists for every system that you have. And so they're all doing their thing. And everybody's kind of like, yeah, we don't really know what's going on with you. And meanwhile, the whole time I'm just getting sicker and sicker. I'm losing weight. My hair is falling out. My nails are getting brittle. Like I'm not able to really eat. So I was like surviving off of like insures and juice and just like trying to get whatever I could in my body. And during this time, like I was in college. And so it was really affecting my ability to be in class and to pay attention and get my stuff done. And I was also working. And so I genuinely don't know how I kind of made it through those college years. But I did, and I I graduated and like got my degree, and I ended up doing a master's program. And so when I started that, like I'm still having all the same problems. Doctors still have no idea. And so at the time I was living in Alaska, that's where I grew up. And so the medical community, it's not super big, don't have really the best medical care system. And so I'd kind of literally gotten to the point where doctors and nurses knew who I was. I didn't know who they were, but they knew who I was because my case was just so baffling to everybody. And I just kept getting more and more symptoms, but nothing to be able to tie it to. And so when I started my master's program, then I started having facial swelling. So my eyes started swelling up, my lips started swelling up to the point where they were just cracking and bleeding all the time. I couldn't smile, I couldn't really move my lips. And so I would just wake up some days and my face would be swollen. And so then it was like my joints were swelling a bunch. And then I started to have nerve pain in my feet and I couldn't stand for very long. So I started to need help with going to the bathroom and bathing and just like getting into my bed and just like basic things. And I was like not really able to work that much. And so things just were getting really, really bad. And then I was still having the gastrointestinal issues. So at one point they had said, okay, well, you have gastritis. So they were like, okay, well, we're going to get you like some omeprazole, get some acid reducers. So I did that a few times and, didn't really do very much. And then I started just having chronic constipation and chronic diarrhea, and it would just bounce between the both of those. So then I was on medication for severe diarrhea, and then I was on stuff for chronic constipation, and then I was on stuff for migraines and headaches and joint swelling and nerve pain. So at this point, I'm on like 15 different medications just to try to maintain a miserable existence at this point.
Yeah,
And
I would say.
I was so just like, I was just getting so sad and just so depressed because it just felt so terrible to have people telling you, we don't know what's wrong with you, but here's some more medication. And I just was like, I don't understand like why this is happening. They're like, were you a sickly child? And I'm like, no, I wasn't sick. Like, I don't know where this came from. I just woke up one day, I wasn't feeling good, and then everything went downhill. And so finally, the doctors in Alaska were like, we can't do anything else for you. So you're going to have to go outside. So I went to Virginia Mason in Seattle. And I did a bunch of tests and studies and saw different doctors there. And they came out with no conclusion of what was wrong with me. So I went back home and I was super discouraged. And I just was like, I guess I'm just going to have to live like this. And it's just going to be miserable and my body's falling apart. And, like I can't even go to the bathroom, by myself. Like I need help. And it started to get more and more depressing because I mean, I was still young, and I associated like some of the problems that I was having with like older people and, needing help taking a shower, or I was like, I needed to get a shower seat, like, and I needed to get the little handle so I could sit on the toilet, like, and not fall over. And, I was malnourished, I was underweight. And so just like everything was just kind of just like coming down, and I just was like feeling completely out of control. And so one of my doctors was like, okay, well, I'm going to refer you to the Mayo Clinic. And so I was like, okay. And I was kind of skeptical because I was like, well, I went to Virginia Mason in Seattle and, spent time there, spent money there, didn't really come away with anything. So I was just kind of like, I don't know if I want to do that. And so finally I was like, okay, like I'll try it. And so I went to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, and they did kind of the same thing and ran the gamut of tests and blood work and all the different things. And so what I came away from there was I had pelvic floor dysfunction, I had anorectal dysfunction, and then I had the chronic constipation where I wasn't able to empty. And so they were like, you have some kind of like muscle and nerve kind of disorder, but nothing structurally is wrong. So they were like, we don't really know how to treat that or what to do with that. Because it's not like, oh, you have a hole in your intestines. Okay, we can see that there's a problem. And they're like, we can't figure out why things are not working. So their recommendation was go back to Alaska, do pelvic floor therapy, because at this point, I was having urinary and fecal incontinence because of the chronic constipation. And then just because my muscles weren't working right, I didn't really have control over my bowels. And so I went back to Alaska, and they said I had functional dyspepsia. So they advised some like functional dyspepsia, like medicine. And then I did pelvic floor therapy, which was one of the best things that I did. I love pelvic floor therapy. I'm a huge advocate and fan of pelvic floor therapy. If you
Before you
have
go
any,
on with that, yeah, let's
yeah,
talk about pelvic floor therapy and what
yeah.
its benefits and what it actually did for you.
So when I went in and I started pelvic floor therapy, um, I didn't have the control over my muscles. And because of the chronic constipation, it was putting a lot of pressure on my rectum. And just because I was getting so backed up, I literally had stool that was going all the way up my intestines. And if I ate something, it made me sick because everything was literally just sitting there. And so with pelvic floor therapy, what I had to do was different like breathing exercises and just basically imagining opening and closing my muscles and just practicing those motions. And then once I kind of got that down, it started to help me to think about, okay, I need to contract or expand my muscles. I need to think about, okay, I just ate something, so I need to kind of help my body instead of those natural kind of processes working where, you don't necessarily think about, am I contracting or expanding my muscles? Like you're like, okay, I go to the bathroom and then I defecate and then, okay, this is done. But for me, I had to really develop a manual process and kind of take that over for my body, and retrain myself to kind of flex and contract and expand my muscles to be able to try to get things out and to hold things in when I need to hold things in. So the pelvic floor therapy, it really helped to stop the fecal incontinence and the urinary incontinence. And that was one of the most helpful things to me because on top of everything I had going on, it's like, okay, now you're peeing on yourself and pooping on yourself. Like, okay,
Yeah, like enough is enough. I can't do anymore.
Yeah, I'm just like, I can't even wear regular underwear anymore. Like I don't have control over this. I'm like, this is just completely crazy. And so through pelvic floor therapy, I was able to get that portion resolved, but I still had the chronic constipation. And so I was on they had advised me to do Miralax because I'd done like a ton of like chronic constipation medications and stuff, and nothing really worked. And so I was drinking literally like industrial sized bottles of Miralax almost every day. And a lot of times it wasn't really doing a lot, or it would just kind of mush up what was above what was compacted. And so then it would just make me more sick. And so my final kind of straw was I was having to self-defecate. So I was having to put gloves on, and I was having to scoop the poop out of my rectum.
Wow.
And it was because it had gotten like I literally could not empty by myself anymore. And when I eventually, like on occasions when I could get things out, it was ripping my anus. It was causing cracks and fissures and all kinds of things. And I was bleeding. It was very, very painful. And so I was just having to scoop things out myself. And that was like the moment for me that I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I cannot live like this. I can't do it. And so I had just started seeing a colorectal surgeon because the gastroenterologist was like, I don't really know what your problem is. And I've given you all these medications, and you've done all this therapy, and you've done all these procedures. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's something with your intestines. I think it's further down. You need to go see a colorectal surgeon. So I'm like, okay,
Right.
well,
What else are you going to do? Right. They recommend it.
yeah, like,
What we're doing.
yeah, I'm like, okay. So I go to the colorectal surgeon, and she kind of had mentioned to me and doing an ostomy. And I didn't really understand what that was. And so I just was like, okay. And I had a lot of just medical kind of PTSD and anxiety and things. And so I wasn't always the best at advocating for myself and kind of being like, okay, what is that?
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that to me? And so I kind of just went along with it. And I was like, oh, okay, and she was like, well, for insurance purposes, I have to like try a few different other medications and just to show them that, hey, this stuff doesn't work. So I was like, okay. And so I'm going through that. And like during this time, I'm just like bleeding from my rectum and having bloody diarrhea, bloody stools. And it was just getting out of hand. And so finally she was like, I really want to do a temporary ileostomy. And I was like, okay. Again, still not fully understanding what she was talking about. And she kind of drew me a picture, and I was just like, oh, okay. Like, but it didn't like really fully click what she was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just like, okay, but I was so desperate at that point. I was like, I don't care what you do. Like, I genuinely do not care what you do. If you think it's going to help and make a difference, I will try it. I was like, because at this point, I'm like, I just like, I can't take it anymore. I can't do it. I was like, I don't want to try another medication. I don't want to do another therapy. I don't want to do another anything. I don't want to go anywhere else. And, it had been about 7 or 8 years at this point. So I was just like, I can't take it. And so she's like, okay, well, let's try this temporary ostomy surgery.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't work, we can take it down, and then we'll just have to reevaluate from there. And so I'm like, okay. So I go through signing all the paperwork, doing all the things, still not fully understanding what in the world that I'm getting myself into. And so I go in for the surgery. She's like, takes her little permanent marker, and she's like, okay, well, I think I'm gonna do it right here. And she's like, yeah, I think it'll be high enough. Well, you'll have to wear like high-waisted pants and stuff like that. But, and I was like, okay, like, still just like, I don't care. Genuinely don't care. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I just want relief. And so I went in for the surgery, came out of the surgery, and I like look down, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, what did I do?
Right. Right.
Okay, and then I was like, well, I guess this is what an ostomy is. And like that genuinely was like the moment that I just like was like, oh, okay. And I when I look back on it, I can't explain to you what I thought was happening. I can't explain to you what I thought she was going to do. I knew I was going in for surgery, but for some reason in my mind, it didn't translate. Oh, we're going to actually create a hole and stick part of your intestine through, and that's going to be sticking outside your body. And then there's going to be a bag. And so I was just like, okay, okay. And so the nurse came in and she was like, oh, okay, so you have ostomy surgery. And then she's like, well, how do you empty it? And I'm like, I don't know. I just had surgery like 5 hours ago. I have no idea. No. And so like the nurses I had, none of the nurses I had really knew what an ostomy was or how to take care of it or what to do or any of that stuff. And so they were asking me questions and I'm like, I literally just got out of surgery. I have no idea. I didn't even know what I was actually getting. So I'm the wrong person to ask. And so for Alaska, there's only one ostomy nurse. And so
The whole
she,
state.
mhm, yes, for the whole state.
Wow. Okay. Sorry. That just shocked me. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so I learned that at that moment as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one ostomy nurse, so for all the ostomy surgeries that happen, she's the only one that's going in and trying to help you out and give you tips and tricks and show you how to change your ostomy and do all that kind of stuff. So typically, you only had like 30 minutes or an hour with her, and that was it. And so she came in and she was like, okay, here's all these different products. Here's this, ostomy catalog. Here's all this stuff. And she's like, just, okay, here's how you change it. And, cutting your like wafer and doing all the stuff. And so I was like, I had a couple times with her, practicing that. And then that was it. And so I got discharged after a couple of days and I went home. And so I had to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that is honestly how I got started with my Instagram ostomy and stuff because I didn't have the resources. There's only one ostomy nurse. And I was trying to figure out what are these products? What do I do? What should I use? Like, does I just thought like, okay, well, they gave me, these products in the hospital, so I have to use those. I didn't realize, oh, there's other manufacturers and you can try different things and some stuff works for some people and some stuff doesn't. And so the first set of products that they gave me, I started to have like skin rashes with it. And so before I figured out that there was other manufacturers, I was just still using those products. And so my skin was like doing terrible. And so I kind of like looked around on the internet and Instagram, and I was just like YouTube and just like trying to find whoever that I could that had some information.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of started like looking at different things. And then I was just like, this is kind of ridiculous. There's not a lot of ostomy education out there. There's not a lot of, hey, you're new at this, like let's talk about this some more. Let's educate you on products, manufacturers, and the different types of things you can do and tips and tricks and all the different things that you just don't know because you don't know.
Right.
And you struggle and you stumble and you suffer through things sometimes unnecessarily because the information is not readily available. It's not really out there.
And now
And so,
this is 2 years ago. So
yeah.
so 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. So you just started
Yeah.
doing researching and, said, I'm going to create this Instagram account. But so
Mm-hmm.
now, how did you find out information? Did you hashtag ostomy and see other ostomates putting things out there and starting to get information that way? Or?
Yeah. So for Instagram, yeah, I just started doing like hashtag ostomy, hashtag ileostomy. hashtag #loopiliostomy. And those were kind of what I started with. And then on YouTube, I just searched for ostomy. And I just kind of like started going through and just watching different people's videos. And that's how I kind of started collecting information and figuring out like, oh, okay, there's like actually some people out here that are putting things out. And, I started learning. And then as I started like getting the knowledge, I realized like I want to pass on what I'm learning and I want to help other people that are new at this. And as I'm stumbling and trying to figure it out, I want to share that part of my journey so other people that are new or even people who've had their ostomy for a while and just don't have the ostomy education or knowledge can look and see, oh, okay, she tried this or she tried this, or here's some products she recommends, or oh, I didn't even know that they made that. And so just like offering up different solutions. And that's honestly how I just started figuring out information and then just piecing things together. And it's been a really amazing journey to be on because through Instagram, I found so many people that were like me, had no idea what was going on, and, just really was like, yeah, I'm just using this because that's what they gave me. Oh, but this doesn't work for me that well, but I just kind of put up with it. Or I've had so many people message me, and I welcome people to DM me, send me a message, and I will try to, help you and guide you the best that I can, and give you the advice that I can. But I've had so many people message me that are like, I had no idea that they made these products, or I had no idea that you could use this in this way, or, oh my gosh, I struggle with this too, and I didn't know anybody else who was struggling. And so it really provided me with encouragement and a sense of purpose and a feeling of like, okay, I can do this and I can live my life. And I will tell you that when I got out of the hospital, I could immediately tell the difference in my body of how I felt. Because for the first time in almost 10 years, I was able to empty because things were going through my bag. My system was able to process. And so I wasn't like completely bloated, and I wasn't feeling, all the sickness. And because of just how backed up I was constantly, my body had started to poison itself, and I was kind of going septic. So I wasn't having that issue. And, a lot of my gastrointestinal issues, they started to ease up. And some of the like joint swelling and just kind of different pains I was having started to alleviate a bit. And my body was able to kind of start to regulate and detox and, really try to start working the way that it's supposed to.
Right.
And so once I kind of got through the first, like few months of having my ostomy, and I was the only person in my family to have an ostomy, or really have any type of like surgery or anything. So nobody in my family knew anything either.
Right.
So, and they were, most of my family, they just got grossed out by a lot of things. And so I kind of was by myself in the journey because I couldn't really share with them what I was going through or show them the ostomy or like, hey, help me figure this out. And so I was kind of on my own with doing that. And like after a few months, I went back in, I was doing my checkups and stuff post my surgery, and they were like, "How are you feeling?" And I'm like, "My head is clearer. Like I'm not backed up. I'm not feeling constantly sick, and like I want to throw up, and my stomach's not hurting." And I was like, "This is awesome. I was like, this is amazing. And so they were like, okay, well, let's just see, if we give your body some time to heal and maybe your rectum and your colon and stuff like that, because I had inflammation and all that kind of stuff. And so they're like, let's give it a few months and see how it's doing, and so like as the months went by, like most of my symptoms around my gastrointestinal issues, like they either resolved or like alleviated a lot, where I could come off a lot of the medication I was on, and I could function in my life, and I could go back to work, and I could actually sit through, and I could go to a restaurant with my family or my friends and actually eat something. I mean, I had stopped going to restaurants and going to the movies and just doing stuff because I was like, I'm in pain. I can't eat. And I don't feel like just sitting here around people that are just eating and enjoying themselves. And
Right.
I'm just miserable, and I'm like drinking water, like, and so I was slowly starting to be able to like stand for more than 5 minutes at a time. And I was starting to be able to take showers by myself and go to the bathroom by myself. And so I started getting a lot of my independence back. And I was like, this is incredible. I was like, I haven't been able to do a lot of this stuff in almost 10 years. And so I was having, because they had, left my, large intestine inside and everything like that, I was having the mucus that comes out that gets naturally shed through my rectum. And I was still having a lot of pain and swelling and bleeding in my rectum. And so while like kind of the gastrointestinal stuff was, eased up and I was like feeling a lot better, when I had to pass the mucus, I was literally almost passing out just because it was so painful. And I was bleeding still, and it was hurting. And I was getting really like nauseated and just sick and just having a complete sweaty, just body reaction every time I had to get rid of this mucus. And so my doctor was like, okay, well, let's just wait a few more months, maybe your body will kind of heal up. And, it's had a rough 10 years.
Yeah, it's
So,
been 10
like,
years. Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
it's trying to get itself together, so I was like, okay. But while I was having that, like I would have to pass mucus and it would take me out for a day. Like my stomach would start hurting really bad, and I just would get really tired, sweaty, just clammy, nauseated. And on top of that, I was just like, my rectum was hurting because it was bleeding and everything. And so I was just like, okay, I don't know about this. And so like after like a few more months went by, after the first year, I like went back to my doctor and I was like, I don't think the problem is resolving in my rectum. I was like, everything else is doing pretty good, but it's kind of concerning me more now that after a year, I'm still having inflammation, I'm still having bleeding, I'm still having this mucus coming out, and it's causing me so much like bodily issues. And so at that point, like my doctor was like, well, we can leave the loop ileostomy, and we don't have to do anything with it. And she was like, let's do some suppositories and some enemas and try to get your rectum healed up and stuff like that. But I am really my body has a hard time accepting suppositories and enemas and things like that, so those things didn't really work. And then so she tried doing a mixture of water and safflower oil through a catheter tube through my ostomy, and to try to get the oil to coat my intestines. And like safflower oil has some like medical healing properties and stuff. And so we tried that, and that didn't work. And so she was like, well, if she's like, none of this stuff is really working. She's like, we can just leave the ostomy. And because she was like, well, do you want to take it down? And I was like, no, I don't want to take it down because you guys have no idea what's wrong with me. You
Right.
guys don't know. So I'm like, if you guys take it down and my body just goes back to doing what it was doing before,
Right.
then I'm going to be back at the same place and I'm going to need the surgery again.
Right.
So I was like, I don't want to do a takedown if you guys don't know what's going on and we haven't figured this out. All I know is this ostomy is working for me and I can live again and I can do things on my own. I can drive again. I can so many different things, you know, and this is during my 20s. And
Mhm.
so I missed so much. And I just was like, I do not want to go backwards. And so my husband and I, we got married last year. And so we moved to Denver also last year. It was a busy year last year.
I'd
And
say, I'd say. Now,
yes,
how did you meet your husband?
so we met in college in an undergraduate program.
Okay.
And yes, so he has an ostomy too.
Okay.
Um, but he has Crohn's and he started having issues. He was like about 9 or 10 years old. And so when I first met him, I didn't know he had an ostomy. And then when he finally like told me he had an ostomy, I was like, okay, cool, like great. You know, like it didn't really bother me or faze me or anything like that. And like I just, you know, went on or whatever. And I was like having all these medical issues and stuff. But at the time, like I didn't know I was gonna get an ostomy. I didn't know I was gonna need an ostomy. And so like when I finally got my ostomy, like I was like, wow, like what are the odds of that? That you meet somebody that first you don't even know they have an ostomy, then
Hmm.
you find out, and then you're going through your own health issues,
Hmm.
and then you end up in the same place though, where now you both have an ostomy.
Exactly. So how did he help you? Like, because you had said a little while ago, you had said, you had struggled, you had to go do research and all this stuff. How
Mm-hmm.
is he with his, I mean, how is he with his ostomy to be able to teach you some of those things? Or was he,
So
or was it even a conversation that you wanted to have? Because I mean, we're female, we don't really want to talk about that stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you don't
yeah.
feel cute.
Yeah, and it's like I don't want to talk about the problems I'm having with my butt and like
Yeah.
my rectum and stuff is bleeding and all of that. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to you about that. I think so. Like he was never like he wasn't like closed about it, but
Mhm.
he wasn't exactly completely open about it
Okay.
either. And so like like once I got my ostomy, you know, he would kind of like give me some like here's some stuff that I use, or here's a trick that I learned,
Mhm.
or you know, oh, you're having that issue. Like I kind of been through that when I first got mine. So he was like, once I got it, he was able to like kind of give me some tips and tricks and kind of give me some guidance. But I also didn't necessarily know what questions to ask.
Right.
And so part of it was me because I didn't really know like what I needed to be like, hey, tell me about blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
And like he didn't necessarily know, like, well, what should I share? How much should I share? What does she want to know? Like, I don't want to be too pushy and, you know, like I know she wants to figure it out, but like I also don't want to be like overbearing with all this information and everything. So kind of like over like the last couple of years, like especially as like my Instagram, like I started doing more on my Instagram. Um, like he's become a lot more open and sharing a lot more, and we're kind of like learning that the boundary of like how much information and you know what kind of things do I kind of want to learn on my own or kind of figure out, or what things like do I really need your help with and really would like your advice. And so like as a couple, like that's been a really great like learning and growing opportunity for the both of us to be able to open up and share with each other because he's had his for almost 20 years.
Mhm.
And so he's a veteran with it, you know?
Yeah, I'd
And
say.
so at this point, you know, he's like, well, I have my products that I use and I know what I do. And, you know, like at first, like he was like, I don't need to know anything new. And, you know, like I've already got my thing down. And so I was like, well, okay. But I'm like, well, how do you know something can't be better? Or if you don't look or try anything.
Mhm.
And so it's been like kind of funny because now, like I've gotten him to try little things and then he'll be like, oh, okay, like this is actually pretty good, and I'm like, I guess I can incorporate that into my routine or, yeah, I can do that. And I'm like, see, I'm like, just because you've been doing it for a while, you could still learn some things. There's lots of stuff out there. And
Exactly. I
so we
mean,
kind of
things change
laugh.
all the time. Things change all the time. Like even the different
Mm-hmm.
types of flanges and the better flanges and the different
Mm-hmm.
bags and all of that stuff. I mean, the stoma genie, and even
Mm-hmm.
the hands-free stoma genie, which
Mm-hmm.
is pretty amazing. For
Mm-hmm.
people with an ileostomy, I have a colostomy, so I don't really have to worry about that. But just
Mm-hmm.
knowing that these products and these different things are out there, and seeing
Mm-hmm.
that at the UOA, at UOAA. So
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, all right. So now you're in Denver, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you go to a new doctor and
Yes, so I got established with a new doctor, and I was telling him about the mucus issue because I'm still having it,
Mhm,
and it's still very painful, still bleeding. And so he was like, okay, well, and before I got pregnant, I had gone to see the surgeon, and I was like, hey, here's my records from Alaska. Here's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, I have this loop ileostomy, but I was like, I would like to actually make it permanent. And I said, because the issues that I'm having, I think would be resolved if I just basically had everything taken out
mhm,
and sewed up and got my Barbie butt. And I was like, I think I'd just call it good. And I said, I have thought about it and I understand now of what I'm going through.
mhm,
And I said, for my own mental health and my physical health, I think this is going to be the best thing for me to do. I was like, I have zero desire to do a takedown.
mhm,
I don't have a diagnosis. And so I was like, I do not feel inclined to take the risk of trying to take it down.
mhm,
And so I explained all this to the doctor, and he was like, okay, well, you seem pretty well informed and, like about the decision you're making, and it's because it's a big one. And I'm like, yeah, I totally understand it's a big one, but I was like, I want you to understand. I lost 10 years of my life trying to figure out what was going on and being sick and not being able to function. And, like I was so sick, I was almost going to have to get put on a feeding tube. I mean, I I hit rock bottom
mhm,
and I was like, I do not want to go back. And so I said, it's worth it to me to be able to live my life. And I've been able to live my life. I have been able to work. I have been able to travel. We moved. I got married. Like I've been able to, I wasn't able to go walking around the neighborhood anymore or hiking or doing different things that required energy of any kind.
mhm,
I was like, I've been actually able to hang out with people, go out to eat, go to the movie, like relax at home and not feel constantly in pain. And I just was like, it is totally worth it to me to do this surgery and make it permanent because I can live with my ostomy and
mhm,
I'm going to live with it.
mhm,
And it hasn't stopped me from doing anything that I want to do.
mhm,
And so he was like, okay. And he was like, well, he's like, after you get finished, however many kids you want, then come back and see me and we'll do the surgery. He's like, because I don't want to do it before, because I don't want you to have any complications. And so I'm like, okay. And so then it was like maybe it was like probably about 9 or 10 months later, then I found out I was pregnant. And so then I was like, okay, I'm like, all right, we're one step closer. So it's like, I'm totally excited about being pregnant and having a baby and all that kind of stuff. But then like there's also the checklist in my mind of like, okay, like my husband and I were thinking like, well, I'll probably try for like 2 kids. And then I'm like, I'll be able to do my surgery and I'll be able to get the issue with my rectum resolved and stop the bleeding and stop the pain and all that kind of stuff. And so like now, like that's my goal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's in the back of my mind. And that's what I'm kind of like ticking off and counting down to, of when I get to have my surgery and make my ileostomy permanent, and really just look forward to moving forward in
Mm-hmm.
my life and being able to be present as a wife and a mother and a friend and a coworker, and just all the different hats that you can wear. So yeah, like I tell people all the time, an ostomy is not the end of things. It's, you know, it's not the end of your life. It's not going to, you know, make you not be able to live or do things. Like, I genuinely, like, I tell people, without my ostomy, I wouldn't be able to do anything. I wouldn't be able to run this Instagram account. I would not be able to work. I would not be able to do anything. I wouldn't be able to do anything at all. I would be in the hospital constantly like I was. I would be probably on a feeding tube. I mean, I would be needing help, still taking showers and going to the bathroom and doing all these things. I would be in my house being a hermit,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what I had become,
Mm-hmm.
because I couldn't really leave the house. And so I told people, I'm like, your ostomy, you can do whatever you want to do. You want to go hiking? You can go hiking. You want to go walk around your neighborhood? Go walk around your neighborhood. You know, whatever goals that you've set for yourself, your ostomy allows you to be able to do those things
Mm-hmm.
and give you that peace of mind and just the like sense of security. And it is a mental health boost. Like, if you can accept, okay, yes, my body's got issues. Yes, I have to have this ostomy. And, you know, is it something that, you know, anybody necessarily wants to have? No. But if you can accept that this thing is going to help me and it's going to allow me to get my life back, that mindset switch is so important. And it's also so freeing,
Mm-hmm.
because once you know, there's always going to be like maybe in the back of your head of like, you know, can anybody tell I have an ostomy? Or, you know, my body's different. It's modified in a way, you know? And so I've got this physical thing. But I think like through, if you can build a community, and that's why for me, Instagram was so important. And even though like I started with the goal of, well, I want to encourage other people, I want to show them my journey, you know, I want them to see me stumbling, and I want them to, you know, see all the different processes and things that I go through to try to get to where I'm at. It's really been an encouragement for me, learning from other people, talking to other people, hearing their journeys, their stories, and just feeling that sense of community. And so I think community is really important for any ostomate, and especially new ostomates, because you are new and you're trying to figure out, what do I do? What is this thing? How do I make it work for me? You know, and you know, it can be lonely and isolating and that kind of thing. And you know, you can feel that nervousness or anxiousness of, you know, trying to figure out with your bag, and, you know, can anybody hear it like rumbling or rustling, or, you know, can people see it as it fills up? You know, all the different like things that can be going through your mind. If you have that community that you can check in with,
Mm-hmm.
and whether that's, you know, like the Ostomy Association has the support groups. If you could find a local support group to be able to see people and talk to people, or, you know, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all the different, you know, communities that are being built, um, it makes the process so much better, so much easier, and for me, is giving me hope. And that's what I want to share with other people. And I want to give other people hope. And the people that I've had message me that are, you know, oh, I have to have ostomy surgery. This is going to be the end of things for me. And I'm like, listen, look at my story, look at my life. I'm telling you, It doesn't have to be that way. Is it going to be a walk in the park all the time? No, absolutely not. And I was like, but you take the good with the bad and you just try to move forward the best that you can, and realizing that your life is going to be better than it was before you had your ostomy, before you were sick and struggling and in the hospital and on your medications and, going through cancer, going through whatever you were going through. Like, the ostomy is going to enable you to have a better sense of self and to be healthier and to be better and to be able to be present and accomplish, whatever goals that you set out to do. So don't look at it as a death sentence. Don't look at it as my life is over. Don't look at it as nobody's going to like me or want me or any of those things. Like, don't try not to dwell on those thoughts and things. And that's just what I try to encourage people. And I think when I, like, me showing people what I call like my real life ostomy content, like, I don't do a lot of like editing of my videos or stylizing or, making sure every shot is perfect or every video is perfect or I've rehearsed what I'm going to say. Like, I really try not to do any of that, because I want it to be as authentic as possible. And I want, she was changing her bag and her ostomy squirted out output. And that happened to me too. Like, I want people to see, like, it's not all, roses, but it's not all bad either. And even when things are not all great and your ostomy shoots output out and you're like, oh my gosh, I
Mm-hmm.
gotta get this covered up. I gotta get this taken care of. I gotta get a bag back on. Like, I gotta
Right.
hurry up and do this. Even though, that kind of stuff happens, like, you're gonna make it through it and it's gonna be fine and it's okay and things happen, and like, my most popular videos are honestly my bag change videos and my videos that I do where I do have mishaps or things happen. Like,
Mm-hmm.
those are my most popular ones. And I think that's because people, they're going through the same thing, and they're having those mishaps and those issues, and seeing somebody else going through that as opposed to a perfect, ostomy video and I had a perfect change and, all that kind of stuff. And I tell people, it's not bad to, have that kind of content or see that kind of stuff, but I do think the balance on the other side of it is important as well. And I feel like that's my niche of showing people these are the things that can happen. This is my real life. Like, I'm just going to share it with you. All the mishaps, all the things, like, it's not going to be perfect. My bag changes aren't perfect all the time. I have accidents, I have things, my bag blew off, like, whatever, I have all these different things too. And so, like, I feel like that's my calling and that's my purpose, to really serve that need I feel in the ostomy community, to see somebody going through the struggles, but also the triumphs of ostomy life. So,
Right. And
yeah.
I love that. I love that. And now you're also going to be able to showcase everybody what it's like to be pregnant in an ostomy and all of the things that
Yes.
come along with that too, which is going to be amazing because I mean, you're newly pregnant, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
3.5 months pregnant, right? 15
Mm-hmm.
weeks.
Yep.
And so, yeah, so you're going to
Mm-hmm.
be able to share all of that with everybody too. And I can't wait to follow the journey along. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be an amazing one. I'm excited for you. And Taylor, I have to thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing, what you've been through for other people to be able to, you never know, right? Because everybody's journey has been
Mm-hmm.
different. And typically I've had cancer or Crohn's or colitis or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, but yours has just been undiagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the best decision for you. And I think that it's
Mm-hmm.
been amazing. And yeah, sharing all your tips and tricks and everything else that you've been doing on Instagram has been absolutely a lifesaver for so many people. I know that. I know that. So if there was one last thing, so one thing that you wanted to leave our listeners with, what would that one thing be?
I would say life is worth it with an ostomy.
Hmm.
Simply that.
Perfect. Perfect.
Mhm.
Well, Taylor, thank you so much for being with us here this week. We really, truly appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great. I appreciate the platform to be able to share my story. And, like you said, just other people that are undiagnosed or just going through, a different journey. But yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Yeah, anytime. And for the listeners, I will be putting Taylor's Instagram handle in the show notes as well, so that you can make sure to find her and go follow her and get those tips and those tricks. So we will see you next week.
All right, sounds great.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. If you enjoyed this podcast, get the behind the scenes at leeannehayden.com/ostomy updates. And also, if you found this episode encouraging, please screenshot it and share it on Instagram. And don't forget to tag me and also the person who was on the episode with me. I occasionally will do special gifts for anyone who does do a screenshot and share it on Instagram or in your stories. Also, lastly, please go to Apple or Google, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast to keep up with them every single week. I enjoy you guys. Thank you so much for being here.